Of an old Peanut strip that came out in the mid-'60s, and I'm very curious to see if anybody here remembers this strip. Charlie Brown and Linus Van Pelt were talking about what they wanted to be when they grow up, and Linus said he wanted to drive his red sports car out into the country and heal all the people all around, and then in the evening drive back into the city. And does anybody remember the last frame of that? No? He said, when I grow up, I want to be a world-famous, humble country doctor. I felt like I finally made it. I want to thank my friends who are supporting me by being here tonight, Genworth Financial, for being who they are. Genworth is... most of you probably know this, but they really embrace diversity with gusto. They are a company that encourage their employees to be involved in the community, and they are in many, many ways. I want to thank the Lynchburg Academy of Medicine for getting the table. I was just shocked to come in and see. That was a big surprise for me. And I want to thank my colleagues and friends at the Free Clinic. The Free Clinic, as most of you know, is really a glittering jewel in the nonprofit crown that Lynchburg wears. The generous support of the citizens of this community, the very small paid staff down there, enable over 400 volunteers like me to serve over 15,000 members of our community. And I want to thank Noreen for that wonderful puff piece. But she left out one very important thing. And maybe the only significant thing I ever did for this community was to go down to Texas and find Marty Wright and bring him back here. Those of you who know Marty well. Tell you a story. I want to tell you what my dog taught me. And I will ask the forbearance of some of my friends from First Christian who may have heard this story before. A few years ago, the Wrights acquired a dog. And we set about training him. We watched him struggle to obey commands to sit and stay whenever a big car would lumber by. And you could see that dog fight to do the right thing, but often lose to his instincts and lunge for the car. Marty explained this tension between desired behavior and instinctual behavior by saying that the dog was struggling with his dogginess. Last year I heard a story on NPR, and it hit me all of a sudden that we as humans struggle with our humanness. It was a story on Williams syndrome. Did anybody in here by chance hear the story on Williams syndrome? No? One person. Williams syndrome is a rare syndrome. It's caused by the deletion of 26 genes on the 7th chromosome. That's 26 genes out of roughly 20 to 25,000 genes in our genome. People with Williams syndrome have some subtle physical changes that most people wouldn't notice. They tend to have some heart defects. They tend to have learning difficulty, but at the same time, they have very strong verbal abilities. They love music. They tend to have perfect pitch. They tend to be left-handed. But the most curious thing, what really caught my ear when I heard this story on Williams syndrome, is that children with Williams syndrome do not fear strangers, and they have no inherent racial bias. Let me say that again. They have no inherent racial bias. When I'm talking about bias, I'm not talking about racism. I'm talking about the ability to recognize yourself as part of a group, in this case, a group of certain physical characteristics. to put yourself within that group. There are other studies, another group of studies on facial recognition by infants that tell us the same thing, that we as humans have this trait that develops very, very early that allows us to pigeonhole ourselves in groups. So we recognize the members of our tribe, let's say. And I'm sure that developmentally that in evolution that there's a good reason why we do this. And I don't want to get into that right now. But I wanted to say that my point here is that there is evidence for this trait. Having this trait doesn't mean that we grow up to be racist. But having the trait, which we all do, is a necessary but not sufficient precondition for developing negative perceptions of other groups who are not like us. Whether we embrace diversity around us or whether we shrink from it depends not on a gene but on our environment. It's the values and behavior that we model for our children. It's also how we structure our institutions, our schools, our churches, our government, our military, our businesses. I grew up in segregated Lynchburg, Virginia. And so I went to segregated schools. That reinforced my inherent racial bias. I was raised in a church that said that homosexuality was sinful, that it was a sickness. Our state even now struggles with whether or not to protect the rights of homosexuals. 70 years ago, our military struggled with immigration. Now our military is struggling with don't ask, don't tell. My point is that as individuals and as a society, we struggle with our humanness. Our better angels struggle with the demons in our DNA. The Virginia Center for Inclusive Communities recognizes that we transform society at the level of the individual. It works to do that by developing and implementing thoughtful, effective programs to help us struggle with our humanness. For that and for this recognition,